Hey guys, so I had a number of people ask me how to prune our tomato plants. I guess a lot of people just let them grow and don't prune them down, and that turns out to not be the best way to get the most fruit out of your plants. So I'm going to try and explain kind of why you do it and then how you do it. Our tomatoes are way further than they should be for pruning. Like, I probably should have done this 2 weeks ago, but you know, life's not perfect. So I will do my best to show you through the jungle of what I'm trying to do and why I do it, and you'll just have to excuse the traffic noise behind me. So this tomato plant is a really good example of how suckers that were once itty bitty babies, so this would be a sucker. It's in the armpit of the main lead and a branch. A sucker grows in the armpit. That is the exact same thing that happened, see if I can show you, down here. So this would be the main lead, this is the branch, and that was actually a sucker. And now that one has turned into basically a second lead. And we have the same thing going on here and the same thing going on here. So what this does is this plant just wants to survive as a plant. It doesn't really care a ton about putting fruit on. It wants to survive as a plant. So it's going to make more shoots and more branches and more leaves to take in more sun and more moisture and all of that, and not produce as much fruit for you. So what I do, we're going to trellis these a couple different ways this year, but the bottom about 6 inches of this plant is just going to be trimmed off. There's no fruit that's going to grow down there. It makes it easier to weed, just keeps it cleaned up. So I'm actually going to take all of this off at the bottom here, and hopefully you can see this because I can't see my screen very well. So I'm going to take this off, and now some people do this with their hands, and there's probably smaller ones that I will do and snap off with my fingers, but you don't want to scar here because your plant's going to put a lot of energy into healing these scars already. And you want to keep them as minimal and clean as possible. So for these ones, let's see. You've got another one probably here. I'm just going to take this whole branch off there, and then let's see if I can zoom out a little bit and show you a little more. This right here, see, main lead. This is the actual branch, and this was a sucker that was just tiny that I let go. So I'm going to take that off. And here's another example of a little one. That would grow massive and try to become a lead. So we're going to take that one off again. Take that off. So now we kind of have a choice here on which direction we want to go. If we let this go, this will become 2 leads. If we take one, it will keep on the 1 lead. Some people let them go on 2. I have a couple that I'm letting go on 2 because it was just too hard to split it. They were too big, and it would have done more damage. This one, I'm going to just choose this because there's already flowered. There's flowers up here. There's flowers on this one, so I'm just going to choose this one and take this one off. And now this will become probably 4, 5, 6 feet tall, depending on the variety. And I will keep trimming the suckers off as they get bigger, or as it gets taller. I'll trim the suckers off and keep it going. And then at some point, depending on what we trellis these with, this row I might top these off so they don't grow to be 6 foot tall because our trellis may not be that tall and it will just be messy. And topping them off would just be me cutting this right here and taking the top off completely, and it won't grow anymore after that. Basically it will just stop, and that will be how tall the plant is, which is fine, but I like them to trellis and grow tall and put on as much fruit as possible for us. So one other thing I want to mention when it comes to pruning suckers off is you can take a healthy sucker and bury it, and it will turn into another healthy tomato plant. That being said, I kind of made the mistake. It's not really a giant mistake, it's not that big of a deal, but I made the mistake a couple weeks ago, maybe closer to a month ago, when these plants were quite a bit smaller. I was pruning all the suckers off, and I was just laying them on the ground. You know, I was just moving through them. I wasn't making a pile or taking them out of the garden at all. I was just leaving them. Part of that was because I wasn't really out here to work. I just did it as I seen it. But that being said, this is a good example of how easily those suckers will grow for you. So I dropped mine down on the ground, and even though we have weed fabric, the ones that landed by the holes of the fabric are making new tomato plants essentially, and also attaching themselves to the tomato plants that are already there. So this one is kind of an example of that. I've had a couple, I've even had a couple that have like 2 separate tomato plants completely in one hole, and obviously they're fighting for nutrients and root space and all of that, so you take one out. But just as a suggestion, if you need more tomato plants or want more tomato plants, you can take suckers off of your healthy tomato plants and rebury those, and they will put on fruit a little bit later, obviously, than your big plants, but you kind of have a succession planting going on there. But also make sure you're taking them out of your garden, because they will just take over your garden. So this is what this plant looks like down here. That was a sucker for sure that I just laid down here and let it grow. So we're gonna pull that out. So this is a really good example of 2 leads that you can't really tell which one is the main lead. I would say maybe this one, but it would cause a little bit too much damage to take this whole lead off. So I'm gonna go ahead and let this run on 2 leads. However, each of these leads also have a new lead. So I need to pick and choose which of these looks like it's gonna be the one that produces more fruit, which at the time, this one here already has flowers on it, so we're gonna prune that up. But this is a good example. Like right now, there's way too many branches trying to be leads and taking too much nutrients from the flowering and producing fruit. So we're gonna leave it as a double lead down here, but then take all the extras off. Hey guys, it's a couple days later, and I also wanted to show you a couple trellising options. So most of our tomatoes are pruned back at this point. I think we've got maybe 2 50-foot rows left to prune. And I think those also are the last 2 to be trellised as well. We did 2 different types of trellising this year. We attempted a Florida weave type of trellis. I don't know if we just didn't do it right, or if we waited too long, or if it's just not as great as everyone made it seem to be. And then we used woven fencing, or woven wire fencing, something like that, that we had actually found used on Facebook Marketplace for like 15 bucks. And at this point, we guessed at how many feet was on it, and they said 150. At this point, we've cut 200 off of it, and we probably have another 50 foot at least left on it. So for $15, that was like a really, really good deal. And those right now are by far our favorite way to trellis as of right now. Of course, I would love to trellis with cattle panels. They're cleaner, they're easy to put up, they're not rolled up, all of that business. But financially this year, it just didn't make sense for us to spend all of that money when cattle panels are like $26 a piece, and we need 3 of them per row, and we have like 7 rows plus that need to be trellised. If you're not, just 7 rows of tomatoes, not counting cucumbers. So this was definitely the better option. I think we're going to spend some of that savings onto some cattle panels that will be used for arch trellising for our cucumbers. But yeah, this is by far the way to go. So this is the best row to show you, I guess. We just used 4. I think most of these are 8-foot T-posts. Some of them are a little bit shorter. Again, we got them at the same place we got the fence. So we got a really good deal on them. I think we got those for $2.50 a piece, and T-posts right now for 8-foot are probably close to $6 each. So they're rusted, but there's nothing wrong with them. So we do 4 for a 50-foot row, and then we've got probably 53 foot of fencing, just because we didn't want to run short. But it works out okay. We just curved in the edges. And then as we went through, we used trellising tape this year instead of clips. Next year we might use clips since we're going to be doing this a little bit earlier. So we used that green tape. I think it's called landscape tie, maybe. And tied them up here. And then we are going to, the bigger they get, we will start kind of weaving them through the fencing, and we won't have to use really any tape anymore. They'll just weave themselves through the wiring. And again, we waited a little too long to do this, so some of them don't look great, but really they're doing pretty well. I think they'll be just fine. If we walk over here to this side of the garden, there is the rest of our tomatoes. That row of tomatoes we just looked at was kind of like our bonus row. I was gonna actually get rid of those plants, and then my mother-in-law said she wanted them if we had room to put them in, so we're doing those for her. Again, these are the last 2 rows of tomatoes that still haven't been pruned or trellised. We're probably just gonna run one fence right in the middle and trellis them that way, and call it good this year. So if we go over here, there's some really good sized tomatoes or tomato plants that I probably will also do these a little further apart next year. They're a little close together, these rows. Like these are going to get trellised to this. And that is a solid, almost 5 foot tall cherry tomato plant. I think that's Chadwick cherry. Yeah, that little tag at the bottom. Is the Chadwick cherry variety from Baker Creek. These are Martino's Romas. Those are doing really, really good. What else do we have in here? Again, the Romas. I think we had some, I seen Isis and some like pear, I don't know, grape style tomatoes. Those are all always doing really well. Again, that will be trellised against that fence. And those are gonna explode. They already have so many tomatoes on them and so many blossoms, so I'm really excited about these varieties of tomatoes. They did really good this year. And I wanted to show you one specifically. So this one here, we just put up a couple days ago. And honestly, I was a little bit worried we were gonna break it because it's so tall, but also the stem really is a good size, and when they get to be that thick, they don't like to maneuver the way you want them. They want to just do it their own way. But it worked out okay. So this just goes to show that if you've waited, we'll wait for the semis to go by. If you've waited what you think is going to be too long to trellis them, all hope is not lost. There was some roots starting to grow out here because it was crawling across the ground. But honestly, these things they do really look pretty great. It's not the prettiest, perfect garden in the world, but that's not the point, right? These ones too. Again, it's another 5 foot-ish cherry tomato plant that's just gonna produce like crazy for us. So, and then I'll show you our Florida weave, which is, we'll go this way. The first row we did And honestly, I mean, you guys can see it. It didn't work for us. I don't know if these, I didn't do a whole lot of research on this. Maybe these are supposed to be closer. I don't know. Maybe they're not. We're going to take the landscaping ties and tie them up. And we're just going to make it work this year. But like this, I just think that these are already putting on so much fruit already this year. I mean, and it's only just begun. This plant is going to get so heavy. I don't see how this string is going to hold on to this. I'm just not sold. I might use a really long piece of this tape and tie it to that post so it doesn't just completely fall over, because those are beautiful tomatoes and I want them to stay that way. So I would not suggest the Florida weave method unless I've done it wrong and someone has a better suggestion of doing it. It's just not going to be my thing, I don't think. Again, it's working-ish, but just wasn't what I expected. I think maybe it would be better if we had done it sooner. I'm not sure, but it's not my thing. I much prefer this, and truth be told, we probably will keep using these until they're just used out, you know, until they're just done for. But I think ideally I'd like to use cattle panel. The woven fence wire is or woven wire fencing, that's gonna be the way we go, I think, for a couple years at least. I also wanted to mention that because this fence is used, maybe doing more than 4 T-posts a row would be a good idea, because this is quite worn out. So I'm going to end up putting another T-post in the middle here and just helping that stand up so it's not laying really essentially on the next row over. Basically, while I'm trying to be in there harvesting, I don't want to be squashed by the fencing, so we'll get that staked up. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And then let me know what other kind of videos you'd like to see. If there's something that you have questions about. We are in the western part of Michigan in the Lower Peninsula. So our growing season is not near as long as some of the rest of the country, but we get a pretty good harvest in the little bit of time we do get. Look forward to talking to you guys soon.